Well, hello, hello, hello. Let's make sure we're all good here. It looks like we are. Welcome to part 4, which will be the final part of our deep dive into the mind of L. Ron Hubbard. I'm not going to delay getting into this at all. Welcome folks who are joining me live here today. I'm very happy that you are here to be with me during these special moments when I get to go live during the week, and there will be more. Oh, I already know what the next stuff is going to be, and I'm looking forward to it. But first, we're going to finish up this series and try to finish it with a bang, not a whimper. And on that note, let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, we have been discussing L. Ron Hubbard's Affirmations, and I should probably bring this back over here so y'all can have my book on the screen here while we're doing this, because I've been referring to the fact that I reproduced the affirmations in my book about Scientology. This just as a little quick plug, and since we're having everybody come on board here, this book that I have written about Scientology, and I believe this was back in 2016 that I published this, it's self-published, and you can get it on Amazon, has an appendix that has all of L. Ron Hubbard's affirmations. These are self-hypnosis commands that L. Ron Hubbard hand wrote, I believe 1946, 47, whenever it was. He can, these years as to which year he was with Jack Parsons, doing ceremonial black magic rituals in a house in Pasadena, California, 1003 South Orange Grove Avenue, I believe. Pretty close to where I grew up. And anyway, we thought I was laughing with my mom the other day because we grew up. The first house we bought was in Pasadena, California, when I was growing up in the 70s, and so my parents bought, and it was the address was also 1003 Lincoln Avenue is the street we lived on. And it was funny to me because we then in 1982, 1982, we moved up to Santa Maria, California, where I went to high school and graduated. 83, yeah, class of 87. So anyway, we were an hour away from L. Ron Hubbard up in Creston, California, where he was hiding out for the last years of his life. I went to high school about an hour away from where Hubbard was hiding out. So it's funny to me how my life has been in this, geographic proximity to L. Ron Hubbard's important sites. And these are sites you are not going to find in any of the church's museum locations that they're opening of L. Ron Hubbard's houses. That I guarantee you that Creston property isn't going to be opened up, and they're never going to talk about Jack Parsons' place, even though that was a place that L. Ron Hubbard lived for a little while, and a very, very, very important place. And we're gonna. I brought before we get into it today, I brought some visual aids and a couple things to go over with you guys. So let's go ahead and get into it. First off, we mentioned last time the message to Garcia. This is the book. It's a message to Garcia, and this is Albert Hubbard's writing. You can see it's just a tiny little pamphlet-sized thing, and this was printed up back in the day. I think 1819, early 1900s, something like that. This thing came out. Yeah. Anyway, you can look this up. This was quite the little hit when it came out because the business people used this to make their employees feel like crap for asking questions or not doing things. All right, now this is a book that's been sitting on my shelf for a while. And I've cracked it open a couple of times, but in light of some of what we were covering, I thought I took a look at it yesterday and I was like, ooh, there's some fun stuff in here related to some of what we have covered. And I thought it might be of interest to go over a couple things here and just clarify or give you some more information about the occult background and traditions which Hubbard was drawing or frankly just copying from in so many interesting thematic ways to create Dianetics and Scientology. And so let me give you, we're just going to walk through just a couple little things. Hubbard died January 1986, and he was born in March 13th, 1911. Okay. Here is a quote from Helena, I think it's Helena Petrovsky something Blavatsky. Helena Blavatsky. She lived from 1831 to 1891, and she is probably one of the most important figures in the world of the occult. Sorry, just being okay. So Blavatsky is somebody that I'm planning on talking about more in the future. And I have done podcasts years ago with a man named Joe Zimhart, who's a real Blavatsky. He's really familiar with her. I don't know that I would, that he would say he's an expert, but he certainly is familiar with her work and read her, one of her two famous books is like 5,000 pages long. And she's somebody who collated, compiled, and put together a lot of different occult information back in the 1800s and called it her own. She was just a pretty blatant plagiarist in a lot of ways, right? And her work has been studied and analyzed by people, who have a lot more patience and smarts than I do for that kind of thing. But I wanted to read this quote to you because I thought this might connect in a couple ways with some of the affirmations we have been reading and some of Hubbard's more deep-seated occult beliefs that he never let on to in Scientology. But he had them. Oh boy, did he have them. Here's the quote. The world is not prepared yet to understand the philosophy of occult sciences. Let them assure themselves first of all that there are, let them assure themselves first of all that there are beings in an invisible world, whether spirits of the dead or elementals, and that there are hidden powers in man which are capable of making a god of him on earth. So much of what we've been seeing and reading is summarized right there in Blavatsky's general statement about this. Now, who is Blavatsky? It's Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. There is a whole little page about her. I'm not going to read you this whole page, but this is her, and I've got another photo to show you of her too. But this woman set up the Theosophical Society. She claimed to be in contact with mysterious adepts from the East who promised to convey through her the secret teachings at the heart of occultism. The occult beliefs and conspiracy theory share a common way of thinking, which is that there is secret knowledge and secret forces at play that are affecting your life in significant ways that you're not aware of. I think that's a fascinating connection. She was Russian by birth, and she ran away from an arranged marriage at 17 years old, and her story was that she had traveled to Tibet to study at the feet of the masters. Traveled in the East to study at the feet of the masters. If you're familiar with L. Ron Hubbard's biography, or hagiography really, the church's biography of him, then you are going to find parallel after parallel after parallel in some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. Her story was that she had traveled to Tibet to study at the feet of the masters. Others told tales of her life as a circus performer, fraudulent spiritualist medium, and adventuress. In 1873, she arrived in the United States and met Colonel Henry Steele Olcott. And he was an occultist and journalist with a talent for publicity. The two soon moved in together and drew up plans for the organization that held its first meeting that night in 1875, the Theosophical Society. What set the new society apart from the many other occult groups in the Western world was its mission: to teach occultism to the public without vows of secrecy. Let's get it out there. Let's get it out in the open. Two massive books, Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine, helped spread the word, and over the decade that followed, branches of the Theosophical Society sprang up in every Western country. So that's a really brief rundown on who that woman was. And let me just move this a little bit out of the way. All right, so let me go back over here and show you. That's her. It's another picture of her. Interesting picture. There's a picture of L. Ron Hubbard that he took himself, of himself. Strike a pose, Ron. Interesting coincidence, don't you think? Okay, so then we'll just leave that up for now, or for a second. Okay, then we come to, and we've been talking and name dropping this guy, Aleister Crowley, our esteemed friend, Aleister Crowley. Now, again, there's a lot to know about this guy, but there was one thing in particular I thought you guys might find, a couple things I thought you might find interesting. Actually, let's go ahead and throw Crowley's picture up there. That's our man, without, you know, the weird hat. And Crowley wrote a book called The Book of the Law. Crowley lived from 1875 to 1947. So he's coming into the world just as the Theosophical Society is starting. And he changed his name to Aleister. He came from a well-to-do family. And this changed his name to Aleister, wrote pornographic poetry, had sex with male and female partners, and got involved in occultism. This was during his teenage years. Yeah, so that led him to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And he was initiated in 1898. So the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was a secret society, and I've actually pulled up the Wikipedia page on it because it's interesting in that it's a secret society devoted to the study and practice of occult hermeticism and metaphysics during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Now, what these guys basically had is they had this manuscript, which was a bunch of, it was a cipher, and they found this key to the cipher that connected to this very old mythical occult figure, Hermes Trismegistus, I think it's pronounced. And from this comes this Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn with these spiritual teachings. And known as a magical order, they were active in Great Britain and focused its practices on spiritual development. Many present-day concepts of ritual and magic that are at the center of contemporary traditions, such as Wicca and Thelema, were inspired by the Golden Dawn, which became one of the largest single influences on 20th century Western occultism. So this is something to know about. And what I find fascinating here is Crowley's Book of the Law that he wrote, which we understand from L. Ron Hubbard's son. L. Ron Hubbard read Crowley's Book of the Law when he was 16 years old in 1925. Not 1927. Sorry. Just got to do the math there. And that is the symbol, the cross from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. That rosy cross, which is inspired by or similar to the rosy cross of the Rosicrucians. That's not actually the Rosicrucian cross, if I understand things right. I think I've said that before, and I think I was slightly in error. That is very, very much like the Rosicrucian cross, but that symbol comes out of the Golden Dawn. That is L. Ron Hubbard's lecture series of lectures that he gave in Phoenix, Arizona in 1954, which had been titled by the Church of Scientology, the Golden Dawn Lectures. I don't think anybody in Scientology, I certainly didn't the entire time I was in Scientology, I don't think anybody understands the connection between the Golden Dawn in Scientology as a lecture set and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It's one of those things that hides in plain sight. Kind of like how we have Hubbard imitating Blavatsky right in plain sight. And I found it funny in going through more photos today when I pulled up Crowley's picture here. Guess what else I found? There's L. Ron Hubbard's picture, again, self-taken, striking the exact same pose as Crowley. For a Scientology, that picture ended up being put on the cover of the Church of Scientology publication, Images of a Lifetime, which you can see there. And they have changed that picture now to a picture that is definitely not Hubbard striking a pose of a occultist. But I just had to share that with you because it was just too funny to see those connections and see those kind of hiding in plain sight things that that are right there, right? What was Hubbard doing? Well, he was inspired as a teenager to get into the occult to probably solve or answer problems and questions and confusions he was having because of his delusions, because of his temporal lobe epilepsy, right? And his personality. I mean, he just kind of was just not a great guy. All right, so I wanted to share some of those things with you because they were funny and because they kind of highlight some of what we've been going over. So now we're going to get through the rest of Hubbard's affirmations. And remember, these are the self-hypnosis commands that he was giving himself, I believe, during the time that he was staying with Jack Parsons in Pasadena. And I believe this was 1940, I think this was early 1947, if I remember right. So let's get to it. Yes. Pull these up here. Okay. Oh, in fact, this thing on the very first one here says you can do automatic writing whenever you wish, just picking up with where we left off. This is the first line. And I needed to share with you from the Wikipedia article on the Book of the Law, which is this book that Crowley wrote, where he states that do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That's the law. And Crowley was writing about that. And he writes this very, very weird book. Well, why is it so weird? Well, according to Crowley, he wrote this book in 1904 saying that the book was dictated to him by a non-human being, Aiwass, who he later referred to as his own holy guardian angel. Following positive reception of the book, Crowley proclaimed the arrival of a new stage in the spiritual evolution of humanity to be known as the Aeon of Horus. The primary precept of this new eon is the charge, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Automatic writing. Crowley said that's how he wrote this book, and it was going to herald in this new age. Right? So what does Hubbard go off and do in 1938? Right? Has this out-of-body experience, he thinks, goes and writes this book that's going to, usher in a new era, be more popular than the Bible. I mean, it's just funny that how unoriginal of a thinker L. Ron Hubbard was, and how his inspirations kind of drove his delusions and ultimately his madness, So we have here, you can do automatic writing whenever you wish. You do not care what comes out on the paper when your guardian dictates. You can hear her easily, and when you want her to write or talk dictation, you have only to consciously will it, and the result is written or spoken by yourself without any intrusions of your own thought. It is entirely automatic. It does not in the least affect or reduce your spiritual will. You may or may not believe what she dictates. That is part of your conscious will and judgment. And Hubbard, again, I believe it was L. Ron Hubbard Jr., maybe there were other sources on this too, stated that, that Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, a so-called textbook of science, was written through automatic writing, that Hubbard was channeling his guardian spirit in writing that book. I just think that's hilarious. And I also think it's hilarious because the Book of the Law is a book that if you sit down to try to read it, well, I challenge you to do so. I have not been able to decipher or get through that book in a way that makes any of it make a whole lot of sense to me. And I find that it's funny that Dianetics is a very similar experience for a lot of people. All right. Anything you were told about religion as a child, you can forget or recall. It does not affect your present mighty faith. This is interesting, right? So Hubbard clearly did have some religion in his upbringing, but he wasn't down with that. And I have some ideas, by the way, about Hubbard and God and, what he's been talking about here. And anyway, we might do some future stuff on that. You are a calm and rational being with very fine judgment. You may collect facts. You need not believe them, save as they appear true to you. Oh, there's the genesis of an idea that is huge in Scientology. Huge. If it's true for you, it's true. If it's not true, it's not true. Right? Truth is very, very relative in Scientology. It is not, there is no objective reality or objective truth in Scientology. It's use it, and if it's true for you, great. And if it's not, reject it, get rid of it. It's gone, it's not true. You can remember an erroneous fact as an erroneous fact, he says. I sometimes wonder whether Hubbard, remember, as we said in the earlier parts on this, this is a bit of an opposite world. These are hypnotic commands and efforts on Hubbard's part to overcome his own failings, his own self-doubts, his own self-loathing, and his attitudes and feelings about others. And I think today, more than maybe any other part that we've done so far in going through the last of these, I think you're going to see that this is a bit of a narcissistic textbook. This is Hubbard desperately trying to, and ultimately succeeding at convincing himself to be narcissistic, to eschew any doubts, reservations, hesitations, second thoughts about caring for other people, having any feelings toward other people, even needing to feel guilt or shame or regret is something he's trying to suppress out of existence in his own inner life through these commands or hypnotic suggestions, if you will. All right. You need not believe anything you read. Other writers are often in error, and you have no great respect for their printed words. See what I mean? You can appreciate their quality without regard to your own. They cannot change your true self and thoughts. Their jeers in print and their criticisms have no weight on you. You know what is true. You don't even have to defend your beliefs. They are too powerful. You see? Like this whole, fuck them, man. Screw those people. I don't got to listen to anybody. I don't have anything to learn from anybody. There's nothing lacking in me that I need from other people. This is a theme all throughout this. And I just needed to, anyway, it's just kind of, it's interesting how it just kind of pops out at you as you go through these things. Your memory is marvelous and reliable. And again, this is probably the fifth or sixth one. I didn't count them, but there are so many of these where Hubbard is trying to convince himself that he has what he refers to later in Dianetics as eidetic memory. It's a perfect recall of everything that's ever happened to you. This is a mental, not impossibility, but such a rarity that it is a statistical anomaly when any human being has the ability to remember everything that's ever happened to them. It's a bit of a curse, really. And I mean, if you think about it, we're not evolved to have that. And there are reasons for that. It's not necessary for us to get through our lives that we remember in detail every single thing that happened to us. But Hubbard was really obsessed with this idea. It comes up over and over again in these affirmations. You can remember perfectly in one reading or one speaking. Your brain capacity is infinite. You cannot hold too much consciously in your brain. You could cram 10 billion new facts or scenes or impressions into your brain and remember them all with ease. You have no mental limit on memory or learning. You can remember a thing without accepting it as truth. You accept as truth only those things which you yourself believe after you consciously examine them. You accept all I say here as absolute fact, however. Yeah, think about things, accept this, don't think about this, and then don't think about that, and then don't think about the other thing. It's a bit of a minefield. You will reverence and believe everything here consciously and forever. These words sink into your whole being. They remake your entire life. They are your code, belief, your guiding star. So these things were clearly very, very important to him. And by the way, there are not, I'm not reproducing typos. This is handwritten material from Hubbard. He sometimes messed up. He didn't edit this or go back over it. So some of the phrasing in a couple of these does get a little funky, and I think that's why. All right. You will know everything you ever knew in any life. You will feel no guilt or lack in yourself about any of your experiences. You can recall them all without pain. Your past was what it was. You cannot change it, but you had the whole right to use or help or hurt people, and you are too powerful now to be more than amused by your folly. I believe this is one of the first, this is the first affirmation or statement we see with some concept of a life beyond just this one, that there could be past lives. Hubbard's occult beliefs seem to be wrapped up in that. And that's not, it's not necessarily like an all occult practices believe in past lives as such, you know, or there's different ideas of it. But there you go. Yes, here we go. You can tell all the romantic tales you wish. You will remember them. You do remember them, but you know which ones were lies. You are so logical, you will tell nothing which cannot be believed, but you are gallant and dashing and need tell no lies at all. You have enough real experience to make anecdotes forever. Stick to your true adventures. Tell nothing discreditable, but tell them well. Or if you wish, as you will, tell adventures which happen to others. People accept them better. You can recall in detail tales of adventure from all you ever heard or read. You remember easily. You can quote for company or a book all the adventure poetry you ever read or heard. You can sing all the songs you ever heard, even once, and sing them well. You have no fear of forgetting or stumbling. You cannot forget stories, songs, tunes, skills, and at will can call them consciously to mind. One wonders in reading through some of this just how forgetful of a dude this guy was, you know? And how many of his lies were prompted by the fact that he just couldn't remember what actually happened. I think I might have mentioned that before, but it just comes to mind again. It's just, you know, this guy was so obsessed with this. You can consciously banish any train of thought from your mind, anytime, any song. One wonders here about some ADHD, you know, the looping songs and negative feedback loops that must have been going through this guy's head. You know, I can relate, and I'm sure some of you can too. You can recall words, speeches, whole books, verbatim at will. Whole books. I mean, what is this, Fahrenheit 451? I mean, Hubbard just wanted so many superpowers that are impossible. People just don't have these abilities. You are not a victim of chance thoughts. You are in powerful and wise, conscious control of all your thinking. You are a master without limits. Your brain has no limits, consciously, unconsciously, or psychically. You can perform any mental trick or stunt consciously of which you have ever heard. You are in perfect poise, balance, and control of your brain. Knowing or suspecting as hard as we do that Hubbard suffered from temporal lobe epilepsy, which is a brain dysregulation, you could say, often caused by actual scarring of the brain tissues. Not always, but sometimes, right? It's so ironic, the struggling that Hubbard had trying to tell himself that he was in control of something that he had no ability to control at all and never would. And no amount of praying to Thoth or Horus or imitating Crowley or walking Blavatsky's footsteps was ever going to change that. There are so many tragic beats in this. You are punctual, but never worry if you keep people waiting. The other thing about this, I would just say real fast before I forget, is the seemingly the way he will contradict himself, or say, I'm not going to tell any lies, but then I can lie as freely as I want, as often as I want. And it's not going to worry me at all, right? But I don't have to, but I can. This back and forth, it's like he's playing table tennis with himself, you know? You are a master adept and do not exist to serve people. You are kind, but you are not affected by the desires of others, save out of the deep and graceful courtesy which you know so well and use. Right? No obligations. Now remember, he's right in all this when he has abandoned his wife and his 2 kids and his family up in Washington. Just abandon them as though they don't exist anymore. And he's still married legally. Never, just, no, Nothing. No obligations, no reasons. Nope, not at all. And then we come up with, and you are honest and proud of your honesty. Oh yeah, he was real honest with Sarah, wasn't he? For a year, she had no idea he was married. You are too powerful to cheat. You have no fears of not being first. Then this was the driving force behind an awful lot of narcissistic behavior, predatory behavior on the part of a lot of people out there, is they just have this overwhelming need to be first in line, to be best, to be thought of as, you know, the top of the social ladder, wherever or however that looks for them. Because another comes out with an idea which you thought up is no cause for your sorrow. You are merely proud to be able to serve without gain, for your gain is of the spirit. I can relate a little bit to this because as a writer, people, and I'm sure for some of you out there as creatives, you think of things and then you see them come out. Other people have put them out or some variation of it. And you're always like, oh, damn, I wish I'd gotten that out first, right? But you didn't write the book, or you didn't write or paint the painting, or do whatever the thing was that, you know, that somebody else kind of beat you to the punch on a completely parallel track. They didn't rip you off. They just came up with the same idea. You know, it is one of those banes of a creative's existence to see that happen. And I actually can relate to Hubbard a little bit on that one. Money will flood in upon you, for you are wise and able. Yeah, remember, Hubbard at this time was dead broke, right? Absolutely nothing going on. You have no phobias about the rich. The rich are only people. You need not be offended or impressed by them. You can and will own large arms of your own. Yeah, the question mark might not have been arms. It might have been some other word, but Hubbard's handwriting is sometimes a little hard to decipher. You are wiser than the rich. Your money will exist to serve you. As you spend it, more will flood in, for you will spend wisely if well. Yeah. This was a constant struggle for Hubbard. He just would, money left his hands as quickly as it would come in. He just had, it was a bottomless barrel of desire and want. When he was rich from, or not rich, but when he started getting some real money with the publication of Dianetics, he was spending it as fast as he was getting it, buying car. He bought a car for his wife with cash. Or girlfriend, I think it was. Anyway, you know, just throwing the money around, which is why he bankrupted Dianetics as a movement. He had no sense of economy or savings or any kind of financial wisdom, which makes his financial policies and the church's worship of him as someone who was financially wise so funny, you know? All right, carrying on here. He says, you have no fears about money. You will always make it. You do not care how much you have. Having money gives you a comfortable feeling. You do not worry if you do not have it. You just make more. You want to make and spend money. It is not a primary concern with you. You do it with such ease and have such boundless energy. Well, Hubbard did have periods of boundless energy and did have periods where he made good money, especially after Dianetics and Scientology caught on. But it was years of struggle. It really was. Before he finally hit that viability point, right? When the balloon sort of, and then it suddenly blows up, right? You need never expose or betray any secret God or your guardian wants kept. You can be trusted with vast knowledge and never give it away or use it with express authority. What you know is riches. When you give away all you know, you are poor. You can give out exactly as much as God desires people to know. You never try to make an impression with what you know. You don't care what people think of your mind, so long as you refrain from telling what you know. Vast secrets can be entrusted to you with safety. You will guard your secrets. You can be trusted always by everyone. Yeah, somehow I don't think that was exactly the case, that Hubbard was a trustworthy fellow who you could tell your secrets to and he would keep them safe. If we imagine that Dianetics and Scientology are Hubbard's alter ego, as Judge Breckenridge called it accurately, then you can see how much respect and care they have for people's secrets. None whatsoever. Give me your secrets and I will do with them anything I want, is the motto of a lot of Scientology. Now this one I kind of not quite sure what this is about. Vita does not resemble your mother. I am not sure who Vita is, unless he's talking about his guardian, of course. She looks like a wood nymph. You like her. You do not love her to desperation. You are not jealous of her. She thrills you physically and you enjoy her. So was Vita a name for Sarah? Was that a maybe, instead of, his guardian? Maybe he's talking about Sarah here? Because as far as we know, at this time, there weren't any other romantic entanglements that Hubbard had going. And he certainly wasn't talking about his wife. Taking medicine to make you healthy sometimes makes you happier or sadder, but you need have no fears about being synthetic or experiencing synthetic reactions. Testosterone and still besterol make your reactions real enough. Just interesting. Wonder what this guy was going through with his meds. Self-pity and conceit are not wrong. Your mother was in error. Well, that's interesting. Kind of speaks for itself, though, doesn't it? Masturbation does not injure or make insane. Your parents were in error. Everyone masturbates. Well, true enough, but it's interesting that his parents were giving him a hard time about it. You need never be clumsy in parting from people. You have poise and part from them with ease and grace. I wonder, given the fact that one of the social characteristics of narcissism is a trail of broken relationships left behind. That the people who are narcissists do not, generally speaking, have long-term relationships with anybody, because after a fairly short period of time, medium period of time at most, people see or are hurt so badly by who this person is and their predatory nature that they break it off. Or usually the narcissist learns to break it off before that happens and go find some new source of narcissistic supply. I think this is Hubbard's commentary on that, right? Colds are nothing. You are not afraid of them. Clearly he was. You can defeat them with ease. You can will yourself consciously to resist anything. And that's sort of the final cap on Hubbard's service facsimile thinking in these affirmations. Now, that was section 2, and we now go to the final section of these, which is called or titled The Book. I am not sure, and I don't know that anybody is sure, why or what the deal is with the different sections of these. And we actually still, since we don't have access to the original court transcripts and files, we cannot be sure that this is actually everything. There may be more, and maybe some of that more might clarify some of this, but this is how he organized it as best as it was put together. And again, I will acknowledge Jerry Armstrong for publishing these on his website as the source where I got those from and then reproduced them in my book. So, the book. You are radiant like sunlight. Your poetry memory is wonderful. You can recall songs and poems which you have known before, line for line, word for word, tune for tune. You can quote anything you have read twice. You can read music. Now, it just occurs to me, and maybe I should have thought of this before, but it's very, very possible that these affirmations were not all in one sitting or were all at one time. It could well be that these different sections represent different time periods. Maybe, you know, he wrote one set 1 week and another set another week and another one maybe a month after. I mean, there could be different times that these things represent also. The only real indication we have is when he makes reference in them to current time people who were in his life, such as Jack or Sarah. All right. Just get a little sip here as we're going. Wow, it's already been 45 minutes. Time flies when we're doing this stuff. All right. Criticism does not affect you emotionally. That ain't true. That was never going to be true for Hubbard. Criticism tears narcissists apart. Because remember, deep, deep, deep inside, they are frightened, self-loathing people. One for one for one, right? The narcissistic supply that they get from others is what makes them feel like they exist and that they are real and that they have meaning and purpose, because they can't find it in themselves easily. As we can see here in Hubbard, he's desperately trying to give himself all kinds of reasons to carry on and reasons to feel good about himself, and shut down any thinking about how other people criticize him so he doesn't have to think badly about himself. You are a magnificent writer who has thrilled millions. Nothing bars you from writing, except his mind. Fears do not restrain you in any way in writing. I wonder what kind of fears. I mean, obviously, fear of rejection and fear of people not liking it is something that plagues every creative. Believe me, it does. So again, nothing unusual or narcissistic about that. But boy, did Hubbard have a lot of attention on it. You know, you convinced yourself that writing is hard work. You know now that this hard work is a lie. Writing is easy to you and nothing interferes. And as we mentioned, as I said in an earlier part, you know, Hubbard later did acknowledge that openly in a lecture that writing is very hard work. But he was really in a slump during this time period, and he was just trying to find any way he could to convince himself to get back onto typing and writing. Ability to drop into a trance state at will. Remember clearly what you read. So now he's just cutting them right down to the core idea, right? Eyes and ulcers improving. Faith in power and its necessity. Ability to please women and have women. Faith in own judgment. Ability to dictate. Ability to write on mill. Now, I looked this up, and it's not a phrase that I could find as such, but it occurred to me that this is sort of from the sort of mill house kind of writing style of just pumping out like a paper mill, just pumping out the work. And I think that's kind of what he's saying here in reference to his writing, is just he can just pump it out. And that, of course, was how Hubbard wrote. Ability to plot cleanly. Oh, I wish that had taken. Ugh, Hubbard's plots are just all over the place. Lack of necessity of following pulp pattern. Hubbard said that, what this brings to mind right away, that was an interesting quote. Hubbard said in the late 1970s or 1980 or so, he said, "I don't follow trends, I set them." And I think that's a very old idea that Hubbard was convincing himself of. You know, I don't follow the algorithm, I am the algorithm, you know, this kind of thinking. Yeah, this is in reference to when he was putting music together for Man the Unfathomable. This horrible, I mean, it's the only thing that's unfathomable about that movie is how bad it is. I mean, it's just, how did they put together something so awful? Very few people, thankfully, have actually seen the film. But it was just awful, and it only used natural lighting. And the music was natural sounds that Hubbard was programming into, I think, a synthesizer, a Moog, or whatever the name of those things were. Back in the late 70s, 80s, Hubbard was all about, I'm gonna set some trends in music and audio visual with this, right? Which he didn't, because Man the Unfathomable was not something anybody of any field would ever watch and hear and think to themselves, I want to do something like that. just no. All right, here. You have no inertia which keeps you home or inactive. Yeah, except for his chronic depression, right? Which very, very much kept him depressed and home and inactive for long periods of time. And I don't know that he thought about it that way. He calls it inertia, or lack of inertia, right? You did a fine job in the Navy. No one there is now out to get you. You are through with its Navy and will utterly forget any derogatory instances. Now, I understand he may have been bullied heavily in the Navy. That's something John has said. But he lied and lied and lied and lied the whole time he was there. So the paranoia of people being out to get him and concern and worry about and regrets about that would be, of course he's chock-a-block full of them, but he's just burying those things, right? Just nope, don't exist. In a lot of ways, this is a real exercise in denialism. You are psychic. Straight up, you're psychic. You do not need to press to receive communication. You can let people in any world talk to you while you are wide awake. It's interesting, the quotes on that, huh? People. I think he's referring here to spirits and whatnot, as well as whatever humans. You can see them clearly. You have no doubts of any kind about them. You are afraid of none of them, but can cancel them out at will if they are evil to you. So yeah, here we're definitely talking about matters of communication with the spirit world, or the, beyond the veil, or whatever, the elementals Hubbard referred to them as, which is also in that Blavatsky quote earlier, the elemental spirits. The voice of your holy guardian is distinct from all the rest. So it wasn't just the guardian figure that he was seeing and hearing in his mind, or as real manifestations around him. Audio hallucinations are a key, not a key, but are symptomatic of, again, the temporal lobe epilepsy. It comes to you loud and clear, this voice. You can see her with brilliant clarity when you wish. One wonders, I just thought to myself, I wonder how many lectures L. Ron Hubbard gave watching his guardian spirit watching him. What a weird thought, huh? You can read futures for people with ease. Ooh, a fortune teller. You are not much interested in your own. No enemy can stand against you. You are always calm. Always in perfect possession of your social presence. Nothing discommodes you at all. Nothing embarrasses you. Your speech is musical and lovely. Man, he really had a thing about his voice, didn't he? Your words are well chosen and beautifully rhymed. You never forget what you want to say. I have to wonder, with all of this forgetfulness and the memory stuff and the voices and everything else, another condition we can lay on him would certainly be some ADHD. I see a lot of it in what he's writing here. Maybe not. Doesn't have to be that way. There could be other explanations or reasons, but it just keeps kind of leaping out at me. Nothing can prevail against your logic and choice of words. You have no speech or thought impediments. You will forget all derogatory criticism you have ever received. You cast it out. You know it is only a weapon used on you for others' gain. That sentence right there. Why is it that people would not be willing to accept criticism or try to make their work better? Because they have an attitude problem that you're just trying to get one over on me. Remember back to what we talked about with Excalibur in the first or second part, and what Arthur J. Burks wrote about that, right? Everybody's walking around and they come up to you and they're smiling, but they might have a knife behind their back. You always got to watch out for that, don't you, Ron? Because you never know, right? And so if they're criticizing you, it's obviously because they're trying to get one over on you, because they're trying to get some gain. They're trying to take credit, or they're trying to suppress or push you down, aren't they? You know, it's that kind of attitude, 24/7. There's never any other idea. Desires of others do not affect you except as an appeal to your courtesy, and you are courteous and gentle. Fuck them all. I mean, desires of others do not affect you. My kids, my wife, my parents, fuck them all. None of them matter. I don't care. I mean, the moral foundations that would have to be in place and be accepted as true by L. Ron Hubbard in order for these things to be considered moral, good things to be chasing after, these suggestions and commands. The twist is, it's gigantic. Merely by concentrating upon them, a thing you do with ease, you can change their minds and smooth whatever anger they may feel. Mr. Psychic Intention, Tone 40, Intention without reservation. I will it, and you shall feel it. And that's how I will change anyone who comes in my vicinity, as I will it out of them. Right? Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. The lot of humanity does not outrage you. Its government is merely amusing. Now that's interesting. Clearly Hubbard was concerned about social issues to some degree or another, but the man just couldn't allow himself to have any compassion. You are a major adept, and such considerations are far, far beneath you. You are not cynical or bitter about people. You have no jealousy in you of any kind for fellow craftsmen. You are not in competition with them, for your work is infinitely superior and will sell quickly as you desire. Editorial desire does not affect you, for you can write whatever they publish with ease and any length. He couldn't ever conceive of sharing the stage or having equals. It's just unfathomable to him. It's that word again. You understand all the workings of the minds of humans around you, for you are a doctor of minds, bodies, and influences. Remember, he liked to think of himself as Crowley's successor. And again, we can see the genesis of that here, right? The roots of those ideas. He was he was the one in control. He was the one who knew everything. You have no fears about working psychically, for you are safe, always safe, protected by your guardian as in a mighty fortress. Now, this was a funny one because, of course, I've talked about those thought fortresses, and I didn't get it from Hubbard. As far as I can know, I'm the originator of that whole concept as I explain it to people in terms of being invited in and how we have thought fortresses in our minds, right? That whole analogy is not something I believe I picked up from other people. But it's funny how Hubbard makes a similar analogy in terms of his psychic ability, which of course is not something I'm imagining it as a real thing. But it's a thing. Remember that old movie Scanners? Right? If I can scan you, well, you can scan me too. And maybe we're going to get into a scanning fight and blow each other's heads up, right? Quite literally in this horror movie. It's a really gross movie. I was actually terrified of that movie for many, many, many years until I finally saw it and was just laughing the whole time because it was so bad. But those kinds of fears and ideas are rampant throughout the psychic world, is that there are psychic wars and you can use psychic powers against each other. And, you know, in the occult world is very similar. Magic and psych powers or psi is, you know, analogous or same in some people's minds. And so they have a fear that if they want to use this to hurt other people or get one over on other people, well, of course, other people are going to do the same thing to them. And so this whole defense strategy thing comes in. It's so interesting how much worry and anxiety and stress has existed over so many years in that world with those people who believe that stuff. And none of it's real. I mean, it's wild what people can get preoccupied with. You can recall at will all the plots and situations you ever thought up. You can create new plots and characterize people clearly and wonderfully. There is no rush about writing. It is immaterial to you if people are or are not amused. You write cleverly, and your writings never fail to amuse. Yeah, I think somebody mentioned earlier in here in terms of the memory that, yeah, Hubbard's writing was something he clearly wasn't remembering. And he pounded it out so fast, and it was, you know, and again, automatic writing. Not all of his fiction, he said, was that way, but, you know, whatever degree of influence he had with this idea that this guardian was feeding him ideas, feeding him plots, feeding him in stories, and then he can't remember his own stuff. Well, I can relate, you know, I've made over 1,000 videos. I don't remember all of them, you know. Again, it's not something to like fret over, but Hubbard really just could not get it off his mind. The two women you knew, Helen the comrade and Polly the skipper, were not worth an instant of your time. You do not love them. They were not worthy. You won over them. So this is just more of that reiteration of the victimhood, right? He abandons them. He abuses them. He beats them. And they were the ones who were victimizing him. And he won out over their machinations over him. And Helen was his first true relationship, I believe, if I remember right, from his early 20s. All right. The love of women is not necessary to your ego. Well, that's for sure, because Hubbard did not appreciate or even understand the love of a romantic nature. It was all a pretense to him. You are above them. You know well that many women are mad about you, that you satisfy them perfectly. You will satisfy them easily. You do not care. As we've already gone over in detail from his earlier writings, this guy had all kinds of sexual inhibitions and problems and issues, and he's just trying to convince himself he doesn't. Testosterone makes you sexy. It makes things beautiful and arouses you, but this is will. You can be aroused at will. Oh, he's desperate for that because he can't. And remember, this is not even a middle-age crisis. He's in his 30s at this time. Yeah? Yeah. Naked bodies and sexy illusions stimulate you wonderfully. You have forgotten the case histories of Havelock Ellis. They did not survey you. You have forgotten them. Okay, I looked this up. And I don't have pictures for you, but Havelock Ellis is a guy who has a Wikipedia page. He was 1859 to 1939. He was an English physician. He was a eugenicist. of a nature that was not as extreme as Francis Dalton and the other eugenicists in the movement who wanted to control who could get pregnant and stuff like that. Havelock had lesser ideas than that. I'm not apologizing for him. I'm just clarifying the term, because eugenicist is a powerful word to describe somebody these days when you know what eugenics was all about. The Nazis were all about eugenics. He was a writer, a progressive intellectual, and social reformer, and he studied human sexuality. And this is where it comes into Hubbard's world. He co-wrote the first medical textbook in English on homosexuality in 1897, and he also published works on a variety of sexual practices and inclinations, as well as on transgender psychology. This guy was an early forerunner of discussions or research and study of his time period into sex and transgenderism and homosexuality and all of it. He developed the notions of narcissism and autoeroticism, later adopted by psychoanalysis. Interesting. He was also among the pioneering investigators of psychedelic drugs, and the author of one of the first written reports to the public about an experience with mescaline, which he conducted on himself in 1896. Yeah, and he was one of the 16 vice presidents of the Eugenics Society from 1909 to 1912. So you can go look him up, but that's who the guy was. And he had interesting ideas, I'll just put it that way. And Hubbard here is referring to his case histories. So what were his case histories? Homosexuality, transgenderism. And then it says they did not survey you, if I'm pronouncing that right. What does that word mean? Overindulgence, the result of overindulgence, disgust, having a sort of, you know, when you get too much of a thing or you do something too long and you kind of feel sick of it, right? Well, that's this surfeit, not survey, surfeit. So you've forgotten the case histories of Havelock Ellis. They do not surfeit you. You have forgotten them. Well, clearly he hasn't forgotten them. And this just kind of opens the door a little bit to the possibility that Hubbard was hung up on his sexuality and probably had homosexual fantasies. And the case histories of Ellis were something that he was familiar with. Why? Probably because he was jerking off to him or something like that, or using them as fodder for his fantasies. And he was ashamed of that. Otherwise, why would he write this? I mean, that's my take on it. You do not masturbate. Masturbation cannot harm you in any way, but you would rather have women. Again, you can just see this back and forth table tennis with himself on this. It's okay, but it's not okay. It's okay, but I'm not going to do it. You know? Your penis and erotic centers are very sensitive to women. You are not afraid that someone will catch you masturbating. No one knows or ever will know. Okay, so is he doing it or not? Such discovery would be harmless. You do not masturbate. Only women thrill you and very deeply. So totally hung up on this. Totally hung up on this. And it's actually, frankly, given these hang-ups, it's a little surprising to me that this was not something that he put a lot of attention on in Scientology. As I mentioned earlier, there's a quote from an early book on it where he just says, yeah, animals do it, everybody does it, it's not that harmful, it's just that it, you know, restimulates pictures from your past that might not be good for you. And that's about all he has to say on the subject. You know, there's no articles, issues, rules forbidding masturbation or anything like that in Scientology until David Miscavige comes along. And then suddenly, you know, he's using sex as a weapon and sexual behavior as a weapon to further dominate people, right? Through censoring their sexual behavior. That's a Miscavige thing for the most part. I just don't see in the materials of Scientology an effort like that. And that's interesting, right? It's not till you get to the Sea Org in the 1970s and Hubbard's literally losing his mind that he writes 2D rules and says you can't have sex until you're married. And if you're in the Sea Org, nothing beyond heavy petting. And he puts some regulations on it. But this was decades after this, you know, and I just find it interesting because so many cult leaders and authoritarians and tyrants will use sex as a control factor, as a heavy control factor. All right, carrying on. You do not have to be a clown or a wit to be thought grand. People adore and respect you for your opinions and wisdom. You are always kind, always graceful, always courteous. Yeah, I wonder how Hubbard came off to people prior to Dianetics and Scientology in terms of, did anybody think he really had it together or was a smart guy or was somebody to go to for advice? Was Hubbard somebody that you would turn to if you were down and out? Was Hubbard someone you could have an intellectual, deep conversation with? I doubt it. I think he was probably shallow in a lot of ways, but put on a lot of pretense and was always sort of being bigger than himself. And he's, you know, the clown or the wit, right? So he's always got some snappy stuff to say or some interesting story to tell, but you try going deep with the guy and I'll bet you he swam in the shallow end, you know? You have no mental flaws which hinder you. You have nothing which hinders you. Everything helps you. You are crown prince. There it is again. You are crown prince of your portion of the universe. Everything does your bidding perfectly. All elementals and other dimensional things, there's that elementals. All elementals and other dimensional things obey you with eagerness. All things love you and their love makes you strong. You are strong. You love with great force all things and your will controls them. You may use force and your will with utter impunity, for all things obey. Well, Hubbard certainly didn't have any problem using force on his wives. And all throughout the 1950s, apparently, there was all kinds of force being used against Scientologists, dragging them to course and things like that. If you read the Penthouse interview that L. Ron Hubbard Jr. did, he admitted openly, blatantly to the fact that he physically dominated his students. And if they didn't show up, he would go to their house and drag them back and blackmail them. Well, you wouldn't want your wife to find out what you said in your last session, would you? I mean, L. Ron Hubbard Jr. was not a nice guy. He spilled the beans on Hubbard in some interesting and significant ways, but make no mistake, he was not a good man. And anybody who thinks otherwise needs to go read that interview, because he was asked at the end of that interview, and it surprised me when he was asked, do you regret any of the things that you did when you were working under L. Ron Hubbard? And he said, no, not at all. I'd do it all again. And, you know, the apple didn't fall far from the tree with that man. I have a lot of sympathy and a lot of compassion for the suffering that he experienced at the hands of Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. And the fact that he had a fucked up father was really fucked up. But he was his own man. And as his own man, well away from L. Ron Hubbard, he acted and sounded exactly like L. Ron Hubbard in a lot of ways. At least within the limited experience that I have seen and heard of him. And I've read, you know, Mad Men or Messiah, and I've read everything I could find of his public statements about all of this. All right, and that's why, one of the reasons why I always try to source him when I'm using some information from him, so it's clear where that comes from. So if it's not true, we can just go, yep, we got lots and lots of other information. There is nothing L. Ron Hubbard Jr. gives us that is so crucial, that must be true for us to understand who and what L. Ron Hubbard really was. L. Ron Hubbard Jr. clarifies a few points and makes clear certain points of history which are interesting, but he's a very unreliable narrator, which is why I don't source him very often, just to be clear about all that. All right. So we come to this next one. You do not know anger. As if. I think Hubbard lived in a permanent state of anger in some ways. Your patience is infinite. You are calm. Your patience never fails. Nothing can make you hate or be jealous or be small. You have all the time in the universe of which you are crown prince. See, he didn't think of himself as God. He didn't think of himself as king or duke. He was crown prince. I think it's a term he uses advisedly, you know, that very much on purpose. In his own mind, how does he think of himself? Not as king of the universe. Not as the big cheese who created it all. Not as source, if you will. Right? It's an assumed title, but it's interesting. Crown Prince. He keeps coming back to that. You waste none of it, but you do not fear for its passage. You employ time well. You are not lazy, for there is nothing, no single thing in your universe to oppose you. You have no thoughts which oppose you. I believe here we're seeing, again, the ADHD components coming out with the laziness. This is a very commonly used word to describe people who are not lazy. And given the amount of output that L. Ron Hubbard generated in his life, it would be challenging to say he was a lazy man. But it's a diagnosis that a lot of people with ADHD give themselves and are told by their environment constantly because of the difficulty in starting and stopping and making things happen because of the executive dysfunction, right? Some days you're on top of things and you can hit that flow and you can make things happen and you can work for hours. And it just goes by as though it's minutes. It's an amazing phenomenon. But at the same time, the opposite side of that coin is no matter how hard you want to, you can't get the work done. And society labels that laziness 100% of the time. Personal experience and so many stories and case histories and various things I've read, you know, about others. And it's not laziness. But there have been many people in history who have cursed themselves for their laziness because they were just neurodivergent. And to this day, society in general is clueless about this. We bandy about these terms and we talk about neurodivergency, but very few people use it as more than a punchline or an insult. And they don't truly understand what it means to be neurodivergent or what it is to live with these conditions. And they are disabilities in a way, and they can be thought of that way. I can see it that way in myself and others. But it's not an insult to a person to say they have ADHD or they're neurodivergent if you're talking about it for real. But society and group think is always lowest common denominator and stupidest interpretation of events, right? So even to himself, you know, Hubbard wasn't down. It is indifferent to you whether your work is accepted. You do not care if it sells. You are confident, for it always has sold. Well, 40s were a bit of a struggle session for Hubbard, but he came back with Dianetics. The anger artists like people feel does not affect you in any way. You are always calm and patient. God, this guy. You understand they are weak and cannot batter through your calm. You are not influenced by them or their anger. If only some of these could have actually worked, because hypnotic suggestion can change behavior. And I really, 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 really wish that some of these things had taken hold in Hubbard's psyche, because what a different world it would be right now if they had. My world would be wildly different, and probably a lot of yours too. But none of this positive stuff stuck. Hubbard's psychoses were far more powerful than something he could do away with some self-hypnosis, you know? To survive, you need only do these things: be patient, calm, beautiful, write what you yourself think is good and worthy, govern yourself as a powerful force. No human being has authority over you. No human being's opinion has weight with you. Well, on the other hand, some of them stuck. You are not possessive. You are not jealous because you are too strong. People are much afraid of what you think of them, what you may do to them. Therefore, you must be kind and courteous to them. This was actually the basis of a moral code and foundation that Hubbard talked about in a lecture. Years later in Scientology, he talked about the fact that it is only the people or the individuals who can bring ultimate force to battery against someone or some group, who have the ability to hold that force in check and be a positive force for good in the world. And he was very clear about that goodness and ethics and this kind of thing come always from a position of ultimate power. And I thought about that for a long time. It bookmarked, you know, even all these years later where I'm talking to you about it, because it was such a powerfully strong statement and theme to the lecture that Hubbard was giving. And it wasn't something that I, of course, as a Scientologist, you accept everything Hubbard is saying is true. So yeah, okay, that's true. But it was something I chewed on for a long time. And here we see it again, its roots, right? This idea of, well, what moral code or what moral philosophy was Hubbard operating off of? Well, it wasn't just, I'm the center of the universe, because he wasn't the center of his universe. He had a God that he believed in. He had a guardian spirit he respected and loved and admired and took advice from. And there were forces in the universe that he acknowledged were out there. So he wasn't the center of his own universe in a simplistic way. So how did he think about how to get along with other people, and how did he think about what was good and bad? Well, ultimate force and the manifestation of your will is what is ultimate good. And it is only from that position that you can show others compassion, mercy, or tolerance. Moral foundations, I believe, are the most underlying layer of our personality or identity that we have. And I think that's why I spend time thinking about it and looking at talking about this part of it. Because I think that is sort of, if that's the theme of what drives you, then the emotions and then the knowledge and rational thinking you have are what allow you to steer the wheel or decide, you know, when to pull over, when to get some gas, when to keep going down the road. But the thing that's really, the thing that's making the road that you're going down in the first place is your moral foundations. And Hubbard's road was determined by his will and his ability and power to enact his will on others. Probably a roundabout way of describing, you know, the core of most predators. But I thought it worth saying out loud as just thoughts that occurred to me in reading some of this stuff. He says here, you owe no debt for the kind things people do for you. Right? Oh, you want to give me money? You want to bail me out, Don Purcell? I don't know, you shit, motherfucker. Fuck off. Right? You have no debt for the kind things people do for you. This is your due as an adept. But you are always gallant, kind, and considerate to people. You do not vary your own thoughts to be kind. Kindness need not impoverish or discriminate you. Guy was just such a walking bag of contradictions and so many lies. One of the things this shows me, and I think I commented on it before, is is the degree that pathological liars are lying to themselves just as much, if not more, than they're lying to the rest of the world. You are able to trance. No other human being can hypnotize you in any way. You can believe or disbelieve whatever you read at will. You cannot be hypnotized by any but yourself. Lies are not necessary. You have no need of lies, for you are brave and can take any consequences. Oh, man. Again, if only some of these had stuck, right? You are courageous. You fear nothing. Hubbard lived in fear of everything. He was a coward in his heart. Your prudence results from judgment, not emotions. You have no emotional fears. Snakes are not dangerous to you. Wow. Okay. L. Ron Hubbard and Indiana Jones finding common ground. There are no snakes in the bottom of your bed. Snakes are wise beings. They are your friends. Some have analogized the S, the Scientology S and the double triangle, that maybe that S is a snake. And there's a cover of a book. The original cover, oh, I should have thought of this. The original cover of Dianetics 55 is a image of a worker wrangling a snake out of a tree. Hiding in plain sight, all of Hubbard's fears and ideas and longings and inspirations, right there on the covers of the books. Hubbard directed all the covers, right? So the guy wrangling the snake wouldn't have been there if Hubbard didn't say, that's what I want on the cover of the book. And it doesn't make any sense. Those covers of those books don't make any sense until you start learning about Hubbard's background and inspirations. Then it all starts making sense. You love the sounds of wind. The wind will not ever get you, ever. Will not get you ever. It will drive your ships. The air is your friend, and the wind its voice. Well, if Hubbard was a believer in elemental spirits and dark forces and spiritual entities living all around us, who knows what he was hearing in the wind, right? Darkness is a cloak you may don. Your guardian and your own courage protect you utterly in darkness. You control anything you meet in darkness, for that is part of your universe. Oh, the History of Man cover about the caveman with the digging into the meat is one of Hubbard's implants. It's one of Hubbard's ideas of the genetic line and where we came from, right? The caveman with the huge teeth. I think that's what that image comes from. Maybe that one makes a little bit more sense than the guy wrangling the snake, right? But I could never get my head around, as a Scientologist, the covers with angels and warriors with wings and things. It seems so incredibly non sequitur and out of place to what Scientology's teachings and ideas were. I could never ever connect those dots, and there's a few of them like that. Just saying. You do not care how much work there is to do, for you have all the time there is and can work forcefully and with patience. You can work whenever you please. Nothing obstructs you. Yeah, I'd like to have that as a hypnotic suggestion, actually. There was no danger for you from government or navy. You are too big to be touched by their petty opinions and force. Your force and destiny is infinite power. Again, right? Just building on those, building up that moral clarity for himself as to, you know, how he should be and relation to others. Domination, domination, domination. It's always about that. You believe implicitly in God. And again, the question is really just which God, which I think we're going to talk about in a future video. You have no doubts of the all-powerful. You believe your guardian perfectly. You hear her certainly and clearly. You are too strong, too big to be touched by mortal opinions. You are tolerant towards your mother and father. You loved them. You have no respect for their opinions, for you know much more. You are always kind to them. Their good opinion of you is assured. Their good opinion and praise means nothing whatever to you. There's more of the table tennis, right? Back and forth. Here's one thing, let's contradict it. Only Flavia, Julia, and then the all-powerful have opinions worth inclining toward. You have always done right by your parents. You did your best. You have no worries about it. Your mother's theories on psychology were wrong. They do not now affect you. Man, what did his mother lay on him? I wonder. Oh, I am all full of wonderment. What did his mother lay on him from psychology? And could it be that that might underlie some of his hatred of psychiatry and psychology? One has to wonder. Maybe. We always go back to they rejected him. They rejected Dianetics. But maybe there was an earlier beginning to that. Flavia Julia is the name of his guardian spirit. We talked about that in an earlier episode. The opinions of your aunts and uncles are worthless. You are kind to them. They mean nothing to you. Yeah, this guy's family must have had some interesting things to share with him and statements to make about him to his face, I'm sure, the entire time he was growing up. And he must have just built up resentment after resentment after resentment. And he probably was grossly misunderstood in a lot of ways, right? But because unfortunately, not only could he have not known about things like temporal lobe epilepsy or Gaussian syndrome, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm always on that one. But his family couldn't have either, right? Nobody in his life could have. They had no idea what was actually wrong with him. Music and color are beautiful to you. You sense them delicately. They affect you strongly. You are expert at modeling, drawing, painting. Nothing hinders you from painting magnificently. Mediums of art are your slaves, just like all the men around him, right? You have entire confidence in them as servants. You are powerful in the arts. Nothing opposes you. You create wonderful music. You do not care what people think of your art. Obviously, the plagued, self-critical, starving artist trying to overcome his own doubts. Your penmanship is wonderful, beautiful. I'm sorry. Oh, man. Okay, sorry about that. Just... Whoa, if you've ever seen anything of L. Ron Hubbard's handwriting, it took me a couple years to figure out how to read that dude's handwriting as a Scientologist, right? Because there's some writings in Scientology that are just in his handwriting, not just the OT3 stuff. And there is no one on this earth, I think, who could describe L. Ron Hubbard's handwriting as beautiful. You control pen like a great artist. Oh, if only. You write wonderful poetry. He doesn't. There's a book of his poetry. It's not great. It's not horrible. It's not like I mean, poetry is very subjective, but to say it's wonderful, your guardian dictates it, and she is all wise. Yeah. So there it is, right? Hubbard's not writing it. His guardian is. And he's wondering why he has all these memory problems, right? And yet he's assigning the source of his writing to another entity. It's such a hodgepodge of contradictions. People gasp and thrill to your poetry. No, they don't. I never encountered in all the years in Scientology, not one person ever brought up L. Ron Hubbard's poetry. It made no difference, had no significance on any Scientologist that I ever met or heard from the stage, off the stage, in private, in person, in public, rather. No one cared about his poetry. ever. It wasn't that good. You can look it up. There's a couple of books out there that have Hubbard's writings in them and have some of his poetry in them. Right, your guardian dictates it. Yes. You handle all forms superbly. You do not care what people think of your poetry. You have always written the most magnificent verse known because of your guardian. This recurring theme, of course, of you don't care, nobody, you don't care what other people think, is, of course, classic narcissistic self-lie, right? Deception. Your guardian can dictate stories, poems to you at will. You do not oppose them. You accept and write them easily. You are not eager. You cannot doubt. All objects are your friends. You can ask from and receive past history of any object. That's an interesting statement. Tell me about yourself, Mr. Notepad. What have you seen or heard? Really? I mean, it's kind of what he's saying. No part of that history affects you emotionally or psychically. The past of objects cannot harm you. One wonders if there might be other objects of more significance to Hubbard that he was inquiring to and about. Maybe occult ritual objects, things like that come to mind, right? Hubbard talked in Scientology about how you would understand and know a thing fully by permeating it. Like as a thetan, like spiritually, you permeate it. That's the word he used. You become it in a way. You take over the space of it. And that's how you would learn, for example, about how to drive a car or know about how a car works, is you would permeate the object. And it's interesting because if you didn't know anything about a car and you didn't know that it was a vehicle that transports people or how to drive it or how it works, taking it apart isn't necessarily going to tell you that. Looking, at the engine and all that isn't necessarily going to tell you that. But Hubbard believed, quite mistakenly, that just by permeating a thing, you could know everything about it and have ultimate skill with it. And there are practices in Scientology called reach and withdrawal, where you will spend minutes or even hours reaching or touching a thing and withdrawing from it. Reach it, withdraw from it. Reach it, withdraw from it. And you do this with things that you're trying to learn how to use better or become more familiar with. So in Scientology, we would constantly be doing reach and withdraw on things like when I learned how to use a printing press or I learned how to use a laminator, you would do reach and withdraw from it. Right? And here we have, again, roots of that thinking and those ideas, right? Why would that be throughout Scientology? Because Hubbard thought that objects had histories that you could inquire about, right? And he never went that far with it, except for that whole permeate thing. But that's in Scientology. That's part of its practices. And the reach and withdraw is stuff that every Scientologist does eventually. There's nobody who doesn't get into that at some point. Interesting, huh? I think so. Anyway, carry on here. Your book, The One Commandment. It was actually the one command. So I think he actually, and which he says in the next one. So anyway, interesting. The one commandment applied only to the material. It is true. It freed you forever from the fears of the material world and gave you material control over people. There is no material will. There's probably a lot to unpack in that paragraph. Again, if we remember that it's about how people are acting toward one another and the way that they fall into line with one another and the way that they're always trying to get one over on other people. This is the limited amount of information we have about what's in there, as well as this whole concept of survive and how survival is the dynamic principle of existence. But Hubbard was clear in his lectures later in Scientology that that is a material thing, that's not what thetans are trying to do. Spirits are not trying to survive. They can't help but survive. You literally, he says, you cannot kill a thetan. You can't. There's no undoing them. There's no dissolving them. There's no as-ising a thetan. Scientology terminology for making something disappear. You can't do that to a thetan, right? But you can do it to anything in the material world. Anything is subject. You could blot out the sun if you had enough, spiritual psychic power and will to do it, right? So I think that's what he's kind of talking about here. The one command applied but slightly to the spiritual world and other planes. There is psychic willpower possessed by a very few. You possess such willpower, and it is enormously strong and irresistible. You work it consciously. Those things you consciously state that you will come to be. Oh yeah, that you consciously state that you will come to be. Okay, fine. I guess again, the language here is kind of handwritten notes, right? So it's not necessarily grammatically correct. And that's why sometimes I stumble around in the reading on this thing. But interesting, huh? Other planes. He never, ever, that I remember at least, I never remember Hubbard talking about other planes of existence in Scientology. That's the kind of shit he kept to himself. The criticism of the one command which was given to material things was not leveled at you. It was not worthy. It did not detract from the value of the book. It was from small people. You gave it no heed. It did not affect you. Right? Again, here's the inner struggle. Blah, blah, blah. But the one command was clearly something that Hubbard did not just pack away and forget about. It had a great deal of significance to him. And because it was, 1938 that he has that experience and writes that book. And then the war happens. And then we're coming up to 9-10 years later, and it's still heavily on his mind. There was one error in that book, and you have psychically willed it into nothing. It was the electronic theory of the workings of the human mind. Really. I just think it's funny that he says error, because he later had lectures in Scientology which were all about the electronics of the spirit and the human mind. Human material minds do work this way, and you were right. Your own mind does not work this way. Of course, he's the exception. You have great spiritual strength. Your mind is not material. It does not react like any human mind. Whatever is fed to your mind can be sorted out. You can forget at will. Men's facts fed to you need not affect your thought if they are a part of the lives and mores and morals of men. Your thought processes do not warp on facts which are fed to you. You can receive sense messages and remember them, but you need not add them into your own thought processes. It's pretty clear that Hubbard was a very, very confused boy when it came to his relationship to himself and his thinking. And he had this whole inner world that was so much more complicated and advanced into these occult beliefs and ideas than I'd ever given appreciation to. I mean, going over these line by line it's very illuminating to me, and as much as I hope it is to you guys. You use the minds of men. They do not use your mind or affect it in any way. It's so obvious why Hubbard was so obsessed with being cause and never being effect. That's a massive Scientology theme. It's all throughout the materials, is you must be cause. You can never be effect. When you are being effect, when you need to receive from other people, whether it's sexual pleasure or input or conversation or thought, or you're reliant, in other words, on anybody else for anything, that's bad. To one degree or another, it's bad. You're the only one who should be causing anything in your life or in your environment. You. I wish that the nefarious, darker interpretation of that concept had been clearer to me when I was in Scientology. Because it never really made sense, because we are obviously at the effect of so many things in the world, from death to taxes to weather to ups and downs in life to, you know, the stock market to who's in the Oval Office. There's tons and tons of things we can't do anything about, which have a great deal of effect on our life. They cause things in our life, and we can't push back against them. But the concept in Scientology is those are always things that you're somehow responsible for, and somehow you need to get at cause over those things. Well, why would that be all over the place in Scientology? Because it's all Hubbard thought about all day, every day. He was driven by this. Right? He's using the minds of men, but you can't use mine. I will never be the adverse effect of your cause, is how Scientologists would say it. You have a sacred spiritual mind, too strong, too high to be touched. Your league with higher beings, your mighty guardian, and the all-powerful renders you beyond all human criticism. We've heard so much about the guardian and a little bit about his idea of God, but higher beings. It smacks of Hubbard's concept later of big beings. He talks about how there are big beings and degraded beings with capital letters, right? Which made me think of this with the higher beings thing. Just more of this spilling over into Scientology, I suppose, but interesting stuff. We're actually coming down the home stretch, by the way. We've only got this screen and one more, and that'll be the end of it. So let's take a look here. I wish this ended with more of a bang than it does, but it kind of the affirmations themselves. But they don't. They just kind of end. But let's go through it. You can distinguish between your doubts and what is said to you. Yeah, clearly he couldn't. You have no doubts because you have no fear. You are kind and considerate to all because you are so powerful. You need never defend your motives to anyone because your motives are right. Of course they are. He's beyond reproach. You have never done wrong and need never apologize to anyone. You never justify or explain your acts because you are careful that these acts are good and kind. I cannot help but be reminded right now of the OT levels and the induced narcissism, and that is the right word to use. Not narcissistic personality disorder, but narcissism, narcissistic attitudes. This was one of the very first things that was clear to me when I left Scientology, right from the get-go, was how much of a narcissistic attitude it creates in you. But I didn't appreciate just how deep that goes. And you can see it here. It's all throughout this, right? Again, it's a driving theme of Hubbard that he is the center of every universe, right? Kind of thing. Or almost every universe, except for, you know, these higher beings and whatnot. But when it comes to other humans, on this plane of existence, he acknowledges no higher power. I mean, he takes advice from his guardian, but as he's trying to tell himself, he doesn't have to listen to it. It's advice. He can reject it if he wants. He knows what the truth is just because he knows, and he's kind always, you know, with ultimate power. But it really reminds me of the induced narcissism, right? He's inducing it in himself. And then he takes the OT levels and figures out a way to induce it in other people. in powerful ways. It's not light grade stuff. It's not like a side notion of what happens on the OT levels. It's, as far as I can tell, I don't know how you could get through those OT levels without coming out with heavily narcissistic ideas about yourself and your place in the universe and your power. All right. And you never have to justify or explain your acts because, you know, they're always good. Everything you do is always good. And if so, then you don't have to listen to anybody about anything. You can be merciless when your will is crossed, and you have the right to be merciless. You are eternal. You are satisfied to live within God, not the Christian God. Let's be clear again, right? Not the Christian God. No concept of God as most people in most major religions understand it. If anything, it's a Gnostic God, and that's an interesting God. Human death is not your death. You will never die. Your personal memory is not important, but you will retain it. And again, we have shades of past lives, future lives here, right? I mean, pretty much not even shades. He's pretty much saying it. So, so that's interesting because he wanted immortality, and yet he believed he would not die. Separate from fame, and a lot of interpretations, including my own, of how Hubbard imagined he would achieve immortality would be through people constantly saying his name, and you know, that kind of narcissistic approach to what he would think of as legacy. And true enough, I stand by that. But he also had literal ideas of never dying spiritually. You recall, here we go, you recall all your pastimes on earth. You have and will live forever. You are part of God. You are the crown prince of your small section of the universe. Kind of like Xenu. You are just and kind. You are merciless to any who cross your rule, but they do not affect you emotionally. You have no fear of anyone, for everyone in your own universe is under your dominion. You will never tell them, never explain. They know. Jesus, man. I mean, just the walking, talking contradictions of this guy, that he doesn't care about anybody, but he's just doing nothing but obsessing about what people think about him. You observe their rules of conduct outwardly. You do this because you are kind. Man, he really had to keep telling himself that, didn't he? I don't think there was anyone who understood how fucked up Hubbard was more than Hubbard did. You do this because you are kind. You never say why you do this, that you do this. You are kind and love everything, even when you force it to your will. You have no inhibition about sexual intercourse. You respect how other people feel about it, but you are not bound by that respect. You conduct yourself with great courtesy. And that is the affirmations. That's all of them. They, like I said, they don't end with a bang. It's just, you know, a lot of the same thing over and over again. The tortured soul that we have talked about. There's one last thing I'm going to say here and then wrap up for today. I mentioned this in the Q&A show I did on Sunday, which I'm sure, you know, a lot of you saw, but I'm going to say this again just for posterity's sake to wrap up this series. I've been out of Scientology for 12 years. I was involved with Scientology since the time I was about 4 years old, when it was first brought into my life through my parents, and I was raised with it. And I started working on Scientology services when I was 15 years old while I was still in high school. I started getting thoroughly, formally indoctrinated in it. And when I was 17 years old, right out of high school, I joined staff and started working for the church. And I did that for 25 years. So, so there's a lot of experience in Scientology, and then, you know, 12 years out. And since I left Scientology and the illusions and delusions of it, I have been spending a great deal of time deconstructing it, taking it apart for myself and for you, And it's all been very, very cathartic, and it's been very, very helpful in, you know, in the recovery process. And by cathartic, I mean healing. Maybe that's not exactly the right word. I've been wondering about that lately, but it is a healing process and a recovery process, meaning you're not only, you know, forming scars over the open wounds that the cult brought to you, but you fix them, and you grow more as a result. That's, for me, recovery has not just been getting over things, it has been learning and progressing in new and better directions and more true things than what Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard was feeding me for quite literally my entire life. You can imagine that when I found out how much of a pathological liar and asshole this guy was, like many ex-cult members, anger doesn't even begin to describe the betrayal and the gross levels of injustice and just fury that you feel over what was done to you. There are no words. You know, fury doesn't, you know, these words are just words. The feelings of it are lasting, and it takes a long, long time to get over it. And get over it meaning, well, I'm not so mad anymore, right? But I wanted to say today, Irina, you have been a very, very prolific commenter today. Thank you for all your input on this thing. I really, really appreciate it. I hope. I haven't read all of them, but I see you've been writing a lot. I do not believe in doing self-hypnosis or affirmations, although I do believe that there is hypnotic therapy. Hypnosis can be used in a therapeutic, ethical environment. I do believe that, yes. But I don't fall in for self-hypnosis as such. Not that I don't think it can't work under certain circumstances or with certain people or anything, but it's you know, it's not something I'm going to do. So where I wanted to go with all that is that in the years of recovery over this, I have pondered and studied and looked at not only Scientology and the bullshit of Dianetics, but, you know, the origin story. And today we're finishing up a 4-part series, which is basically the origin story. It's all here. Most of it's here, right? We haven't covered a couple things yet that I want to get to, right? Which will probably be the next videos that I do. Right? I want to get into Gnosticism and the OT8 bulletin, where Hubbard claims he's Lucifer. I think we're gonna dive into that next. But I wanted to say that I didn't think that when I started this series last week, was it last week? Yeah, I guess it was last week. That I was going to learn so much more than I'd already learned, and putting certain dots together and connecting certain things in such a way that, like I've said, and I really feel this is true now and forever, that I am recovered from Scientology. I put it behind me. I'm not emotionally suppressing anything. I'm not in mystery about anything. I had a question that drove me for years, and that question was, what the hell happened to me in Scientology? And I have answered that question as thoroughly as I think I could. But one thing that hung me up was not what happened to me, but what the hell with L. Ron Hubbard? Who is this guy? What was he doing? What was he trying to do? And I've read, you know, well, it was a cult and the rituals and the this and the that. But until doing all of this and going through those affirmations line by fucking line with you guys, and connecting those dots to the temporal lobe epilepsy and Crowley and the belief system and his guardian angel, Flavia Julia, who the fuck is that, right? What is all this about? and finding out, about the St. Helena Church, which was a new thing for me to learn about while we were doing this. I didn't know about that. And it really connected some dots. And where it went was seeing, as I've commented here, I think a couple times, seeing the haunted, hurt child that L. Ron Hubbard was growing up. Something about that clicked for me in putting together how he became the monster he became. And for someone who spent decades of their life, I don't expect this to have the same level of importance or significance to you that it would to me as an ex-Scientologist and as a dedicated second-generation Scientologist who spent the better part of my life following this fucking guy's advice and direction and not having a clue what he was about. Even his photos, right out in the open, mocking us. I mean, what a dick, right? The guy was a monster. But he wasn't necessarily born to be a monster. And seeing the dots connect as to how he became that, somehow, now I get it. Now I really feel like I get it. And I hope through the course of these videos, you get it too, You don't have to understand everything the way I understand it. For me, this has been a personal journey as much as it's been trying to explain things to y'all. So my understanding of this doesn't have to be yours. But for me, this was a significant part of the journey, And I thought I would say all that stuff out loud because I hope in putting this stuff out to people that you can have a similar level of in-depth understanding of what this is about. It's not just L. Ron Hubbard was a con man and he just wanted money. There was so much more, but you got to dig to find that. And I'm sure that, the other kinds of predators and narcissists and people in our world these days who are driven to do things just like L. Ron Hubbard did, maybe we can learn from this something about them, and recognize that there are tortured souls out there who have been given unbelievable amounts of power and influence that they have no right to have. And it should be taken from them because they don't deserve it. They never earned it. L. Ron Hubbard sure as hell never did. Not one thing he did earned him his position in history as a spiritual leader and guru and somebody whose advice we should follow and listen to with rapt attention. Everything with Hubbard is opposite world. And I don't believe that he's the only one. So I hope that, at the end of the day, this is insightful for more than just Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today. My plan is to dive into Narcissism and do a little bit of research and go over that Lucifer bulletin with y'all next. And maybe we'll get to that next Tuesday or certainly next week. Yeah, we're going to do that. And I hope you'll join me for it. All right. And I also say, like I do at the end, thank you for your support. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your feedback. It's what keeps me going here. Really appreciate it. Have a great day for you guys too. Bye-bye.